Hello friends and welcome to another video. It's David here, and I just wanted to give you a quick update on progress for the last while. It's been a few weeks since I posted my last video, but I promise you I have been working away at the lead mountain. You can see here in front of you right now one of the fruits of those labors. These were some Norman infantry from New Line Designs that I was just cruising through my pile of potential, and I came across these, and I thought to myself, you know what an easy win. The bulk of the figure is metallic, except for obviously the dudes in the padded, the quilted jackets, so quilted tunics. So I thought I'd quickly smash these out. They're quite static poses, they're nice and easy to paint, so I thought let's just get them done. The most complex part will be the shields, which I'll do after the fact. But I thought to myself, let's just get some easy wins under the belt. So you can see here there are 16 of them. I've taken to using these little tongue depressors, which I bought off Amazon nice and cheaply, and they are working a treat. So this is 4 to a stick, which I think works okay for these New Line figures because they don't really occupy too much horizontal space relative to each other. But I think having done these as the first run, I think in the future I will probably do 3 to a stick instead, just because it's a bit easier to paint the figures. So I cracked on and got these done. They're almost finished. As you can see, the kind of bits required to go are the helmets and the actual weapons, and then of course the shields, which I could do separately, and then they need to be based. So this was just one of those things where it was a target of opportunity. I was in the mood for painting something like this because I was listening to podcasts and watching people's videos in the background. So I just thought, let's go for something really easy with very little minimal effort. So that was that. So I've got those more or less done. Another thing that I've been working on, and this has been more ongoing, is these are Von Kleist's Pandur for the 7 Years' War from Eagle Figures. I won't dwell too much on them, except to say that I'm not a massive fan of these sculpts. Once I complete this half unit, 6 figures, I will do a little video showcase of them. Oh, which reminds me, I bought one of those little turntable thingies. It's the sort of thing that Ralph has, so I can sort of get some nice, I suppose, glamour shots or whatever you will of the figures once they're based up. But this is the officer. He's probably the nicest figure in the whole lot. But anyway, I'll talk about them when I look at them in detail. So I have been working on that. The other thing I've been working on is, and I don't know if I've showed this before, but I've been cruising through some Republican Roman in 15 mil. This is a work in progress stick. Again, I think 6 is perhaps too many per stick, but this is still me learning how to use these popsicle sticks effectively, tongue depressor sticks. And this in this one with these, I'm following my friend Kevin's method, which is really just quite simply get your colours blocked in over a dry brushed black, and then do a wash with a sort of army shader, soft tone, and then some minor highlights once they're based up as and when required. So I started working on these actually back when I was in Australia on that work trip, and I didn't really get much time to paint, and kind of was a bit of a non-event in the end because, especially when you're someplace interesting, you're so busy using the evenings to explore and do other stuff, or potentially even catching up on work that needs to be done time sensitively. You just kind of ignore the the other bits and pieces that are going on. All right, so that's that's what I've been busy with on the table recently in terms of painting. So I'll pause the shoot right now, and then I'll show you what I've purchased this month, which I know I shouldn't be doing because naughty naughty, I have enough, but I'll explain when we get there. Okay, so I mentioned purchases, and before we get to that part, let me first explain. So I have a lot of figures that I purchased about 20 odd years ago, back when Wargames Foundry used to do these wonderful Christmas sales where you would buy 3 collections of figures for £99, and they would usually each collection was valued at about £99, so you'd get basically 3 for the price of 1. And I went absolutely ham back then, and I'm glad I did, because I got these Marian Romans, Caesarian Romans back then, so late Republican. And recently my fellow clubmate Dave and I were discussing projects, and one of the projects that he's really keen to get going on is a Marian Roman army. Now, both Dave and I have enormous early Imperial Roman armies. His is far larger than mine, but we were talking, and he was saying how his next move is going to be to get some Foundry figures because he really likes them. And I said, well, I have a load, and I've always wanted to do sort of Civil War stuff. There's obviously other conflicts of the period, such as the Jugurthine War. The Civil Wars tend to predominate, obviously. So he and I had a discussion, and we said, well, you know what? If he's working on his project, I'll work on mine in parallel, and then that way we can either combine our forces and take to the table as a sort of unified Roman army against sort of Gauls or whatever, or we could, you know, fight each other as part of a civil war. So my thrust is primarily going to be towards the Civil War. I like having matched armies of my own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of split my difference here and go half and half. So I'm going to do sort of Pompey's sort of impression of Pompey's army and an impression of Caesar's army, and then of course when David and I play together or against each other, then we can fiddle around with who's who in the zoo. So I grabbed 6 of these figures. These are just the sort of legionaries with chainmail and swords drawn, gladiator drawn. And I did some test figures. I was quite chuffed with them. I'm not sure how they look on the camera right now because my little preview screen isn't great, but I assure you in person they look quite nice. I hope the light does them justice. But I played around with tones, so you can see from the right here, this is a plumed guy, so this will be like one of Caesar's legionary veterans. So the plumes will be black, and then I thought for them I would do a kind of white tunic or potentially also a red tunic to just make them stand out. So that was a test figure for that. Then I did a kind of a linen type color from the Foundry Triad. Let me try and get a focus there. And I also played around with the skin tones. So the one on the right is more pale because I imagine him fighting in Gaul where it doesn't shine as much, the sun doesn't shine as much. And then this center fella is more kind of dark skinned. I thought, okay, well maybe he was raised in North Africa or potentially in the East. And then on the left here, I've gone for a sort of very pale green tunic, which I thought would be a nice change of pace. The nice thing about the tones here is that actually these linen and the green really mix in well together, so they won't look out of place in the same unit. Haven't decided if I'll do that yet, but I'm giving myself options here. So here's some more test figures I did. Again, I went for a sort of darker tone for the middleman here. He's going to be from a Syrian legion. I don't know why in my mind Syrian legions are blue, but I think it kind of works well if I think of my Gallic legions as being red, so red versus blue, right? It's entirely made up. There's no historical fact basis for it. But what I did want to do with this army was make sure that I didn't just all do the same color. So my early Imperial Romans all red. These guys will be a mix. They will not be red on the whole. And then there's a yellow here to the left, and then another sort of off-white to the right. So playing around with tones and skin tones and so on. Quite chuffed. These paint up really nicely. What I'd like to do, I think, is do a sort of Weekend Warrior video where I show you how I'll do sort of a group of 9 when I do the next unit. So it'll probably be the Syrian type units with the blue tunics. I'll probably vary the blue tone just so that it's not the same across the board. So Dave and I were talking about that, and of course we then were like, well, Dave needs to purchase his figures and I need to add to what I have to get the ball rolling. I have legionaries. It's more a case of I need sort of upper command. So he wanted to put in a massive order with Foundry. I also wanted to put in an order with Foundry, so we came up with a plan of putting our orders together so we get free postage, right? Because shipping to the United States or Canada, which is where Dave lives, isn't great. So I ordered, as part of my little order section, was CR52, which is from the command section of the Caesarian Roman range from Foundry. So you get the horses, which I'm not going to fuss around too much about now because it's not important. But this is what I got. I got some mounted standard bearers, right? Now you might say, well, that's a bit of an odd choice, like standard bearers are typically on foot. But what I wanted here was essentially standard bearers who would be on the same base as my army commander. So if you have like Caesar or Pompey or I don't know, Mark Antony or any other one of the Scipios, you would have one of these next to them on the base, just so he looks more like an armory general, right? So I got the 3 mounted standard bearers, right? And then on top of that, or alongside that rather, I got this pack, CR51, which is the general pack. So again, horses, which I'll pop to one side because no one really cares about those. We're not too worried about the horses right now. You get Pompey, the great Optimates leader, and then you get Gaius Julius Caesar, the great leader of the Populares, or the Popular Party. So think of him as like representing the aristocracy, and him representing quote unquote the working man, which is ironic, of course. I suspect in many ways, and please don't shoot me down for saying this, but in many ways I imagine Caesar as being much like a Trump figure back in the day, you know. Anyway, so this is Caesar. There you go. And then there comes with a third figure who I think could stand in for, I mean, he's just a consul of some sort by the look of it, but he could stand in for anyone like Mark Antony, or he could be one of the Scipios or whatever. So the principle will be to have Chappie on his horse with a standard bearer, and then maybe have like an attendant on foot or something. I'll dig around and see what I can find. You know, maybe a kind of very active looking centurion or something like that. But the idea is to make little vignettes for each army commander, you know, just so that it looks a bit more interesting. Because one of the big things about the civil wars in particular, but even the wars against people like Jugurtha, is that personalities feature heavily front and center, right? So I wanted to make sure that my army is represented by interesting characters at the top end, obviously, and then you fill out the bottom end with the rank and file as you normally do. So that's the Caesarian Roman project, or the Marian Roman project, and then we'll move on to some more purchases. Okay, so the final part is a bunch of purchases for the Crimean War. So those of you who've watched the channel before will know that a little while ago I picked up a box of British Line infantry from Warlord Games, which I bought at my local store because I had a credit, and I got it for a good price with a discount. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to go for it. My inspiration behind my Crimean War project, which I haven't spoken about too much, is Ralph Astley's project. I would highly recommend, if anybody's even vaguely interested in the Crimean War, even if you're planning on not planning to collect it, go and watch it. That playlist on his channel is just worth gold. There's lots of really good tidbits in there about things like headwear and generals and the uniforms and that sort of thing. Ralph's really done his homework, and he's looked very critically at the things like the Osprey evidence, which I think is something that people just don't really do that much anymore. You know, when people talk about vaccines, it's all about do your own research, but when it's wargaming related, suddenly it's just buy the Osprey book and then just assume everything in there is true, right? So I'm going to just say, like, if you are even thinking about the Crimea, watch Ralph's channel. You will not regret it. I decided to go for 28mm instead of the 18 or 15mm options, or even the 10mm options. One of the reasons is because, in my mind, the Crimean War is very much about the personalities who led during the war. So I really wanted to place a strong emphasis, much like I mentioned with the Marian project, on the central figures, leadership figures of the war. So what you see here before you is my first initial purchase from Wargames Foundry. So in addition to the Caesarian stuff, which I showed already, I purchased a lot of command figures for the Russians and the British, respectively. My big disappointment is that nobody seems to really make any French command figures, which means we'll have to get creative when we get to that point. But anyway, I'll talk more about that when we get to the Crimean War project. This is just about purchasing, right? Alright, so the first pack I got was the Russian High Command and Generals, which contains these figures that you see here, these 6, 4 mounted and 2 on foot. So you got Prince Menshikov, who's pointing here with his finger. He was the commander at say, the Alma. And then you've got The other plumed helmet here is this plumed helmet here is General, I think it was Count Austin Sachen, who was also one of the CNCs for this whole organization during the war. Then you get these two unnamed sort of general figures, you know, using binoculars, and then another one that's sort of looking off into the distance, bareheaded. I haven't decided who's who yet, but these will be assigned names, probably corps commanders or something like that. I'm thinking of Kiryakov as an example, Gorkachov, which is another example. I need characters for that. What I will do, however, is I'm actually going to purchase the bulk of this army. It's not going to be from Foundry, because Foundry are just ludicrously expensive, and their molds aren't as great as they used to be. So there's a lot of flash and a lot of cleanup required. These weren't so bad, I suspect, because they're not used as frequently, right? But their more popular ranges tend to have quite a lot of flash, and the price just isn't right. Okay, they don't do deals. So when you buy in bulk, I mean, we put in an order for, I think, about £380 worth of figures, and I contacted them beforehand and said, hey, do you do like a discount on like a bulk purchase? You know, if we buy, because Dave was buying 20 packs of the same Legionary, if we buy 20 packs of the same Legionary, can you give us a break on that price, or something like that, or additional figures, or something, I don't know, some kind of deal, because we're purchasing a huge wallop. And they were just like, no. Alright, fair enough. We got the Foundry because that's what Dave wanted. I wanted these command figures anyway. I wasn't expecting a discount on them, but it was just one of those things, you know, you ask, you don't ask, you don't get. And I figured it was worth asking. Anyway, so the bulk of my force will actually be from the Great War Miniatures Crimean range. I think they sort of, the bulk of their range is actually better than what Foundry has to offer. Just from the look of it. Again, I can't speak, I haven't seen them in person yet, so I won't buy it all in one swath, but what I did think was, okay, let's buy the pieces that I could get from Foundry. So like this general here, they don't make an equivalent or an exact copy at Great War, so when I buy all the command figures from Great War, I'll then be able to do a mix and match and figure out who's who. My understanding from trawling through fora is that they're not compatible with each other, so you probably don't want them on the same base. I'll make that judgment when I see them in person, but certainly it's easy enough to do like a command stand with Wargames Foundry and another one with Great War. They won't necessarily be next to each other, so you're not really going to notice the difference as such. You also get this chap on foot with a map, and then you get an ADC who looks like a hussar of some sort. He's got a rather handsome carbine dangling from his shoulder, which I thought was cool. So that's the Russians. Then I purchased the ones that are unassembled. You'll see the cavalry on bases. That's just for painting purposes. I need something to hold on to, right? So I thought I would just use 50mm bases, and then I'll pop them off when I'm ready to base them. Then there's horses at the back here, and this is another pack from the British. This is supposed to be a line officer, a British line officer, I believe. Let me just double check that for you. Okay, so this is from pack CM060, which is British and Allied officers. So this is a officer of the line. So it doesn't say what it is, but I'm guessing it's a colonel of some sort. He doesn't look like he's part of the staff officers, but whatever. I'll mix him in on a brigadier stand or something. It's unlikely that he'll be with the actual infantry or the foot. You also get a guards officer with his big old bear skin knocking around on his head. He looks rather dashing, so he'll probably accompany the 1st Division. And then you also get a Turkish officer here, sort of a Pasha, as my wife would say, Pasha, as we say in the West. He looks rather dapper with his little fez and all that. And I think, I haven't really discussed my plans, but I think I will do a small Turkish contingent just for a breakup of the monotony of red coats and blue for the French. It'd be nice to have something a little bit more, well, they're still in blue, but it'd be nice to do something a bit different, right? Not just all guys in great coats or whatever. So there's a Turkish mounted officer. And then here on the far right is another set of high command figures. Let me just pull up the code for that so I can tell you what that is. This is CMB001 Lord Raglan and staff, and it comes with a fair few figures. So you get 4 on horse and you get 3 on foot. Same price as the Russians, £22. And I don't mind paying a bit more for these sort of command figures, because I realise with a set of kit like this, you're not going to... Well, actually, he's not from the pack. I'll explain in a moment. You know, you pay a little extra for these command figures. I don't mind that, because I realise that obviously Foundry are not going to make a huge amount back on the actual mold making and everything for it, because once you purchase this pack, you're never going to purchase it again. So that makes sense to me. It's just the fact that they charge such a ludicrous amount for their base infantry figures compared to other manufacturers is slightly annoying. And whilst in the past you may have said it's because you were buying a premium figure, I think the gap between Foundry and other manufacturers is largely evaporated at this point. Anyway, so you've got at the back here, you've got Lord Cardigan, you know, in his lovely Hussars uniform, famous from the film Charge of the Light Brigade, which I enjoy immensely, even though it's not necessarily historically perfect, but it's a great film. You get Lord Raglan. Now, interestingly, this Lord Raglan does not have his little telescope mounted on a rifle stock, but he's looking rather sharp there. And then you get this is just a mounted general with a map, so I can use him as... What I'll do is I'll look at pictures of the other commanders in theatre, and if this one looks like somebody, and if you have any suggestions, I'm all ears, then he'll become that character. So, but he might just be General Airy or somebody who's knocking around with Raglan. We'll see. And then Sir Colin Campbell of the Highland Brigade. This is without his feathered bonnet on, which is pre-Alma. Again, thanks Ralph for that little piece of information. So in the film at the Alma, you see him wearing his feathered bonnet, but that's not what he wore. He only wore that after the Alma, because it's not part of the staff officer's uniform. But he was given the privilege, I suppose, of wearing his Highland bonnet once after the Alma. So this is him at the Alma and before, which I thought was really cool. And then here you get, you know, some figures on foot. So you've got a chap there with a telescope in his hand. Then on the right here you've got another general staff officer with a map. And in the middle here is a figure that my friend Dave gave me. So when our stuff arrived from Foundry, which by the way, if you're ordering from the US or Canada, well, I can speak for the US. If you're ordering from the US, stuff gets here fast. I placed the order in on the Sunday. The order dispatched the Monday following, the next day, and it arrived in 2 boxes. The first box arrived on the Friday, so 5 days later, and the other box took a few more days, because it's 2 boxes, right? So it took a little bit longer for the second box to get here. I think it arrived on the Monday or something like that, but a massively quick turnaround. It was free postage, which means that if you're going to buy from Foundry and you're paying a premium for the figures, make sure you purchase enough to get the free postage. It's well worth it. Yeah, so I can't complain. Now the figure in the middle here is actually from Foundry's Indian Mutiny range, and he is a sort of at attention sergeant. You can see his chevrons there on his shoulder. He looks pretty snazzy. So what I'll do is, I don't have an Indian Mutiny army, won't for some time I suspect, but I thought I could put him on a base with a brigadier or something, and he'd look pretty nice. And he's got his little pace stick there under his arm, so pretty chuffed with that. I thought it was a nice figure, and Dave just gave him to me because he got him as a freebie. When you order from Foundry and you order enough, I guess you always get a little free figure, you know, a little taste. Usually it's from a range that you've not ordered from, and he got that many years ago and has no use for it, so he's handed it off to me. And this time on our order we got a French grenadier from the Napoleonic period in campaign trousers, which I can just add to one of my Perry units. I think it'll probably fit into that. So anyway, that was the freebie figure we got. So there's a lot of purchasing this month, and you know, I've said in the past, like, I'm trying to not purchase more because I'm you know, I've got loads already. But what I've not told you is that I'm actually selling stuff on eBay. So I've gotten rid of a lot of my Games Workshop stuff recently and generated a few $100s from that. Stuff that I purchased when it first came out as limited release, I bought it because I had FOMO, right? Which in the case of Games Workshop I think is legitimate, because if you don't buy it when it comes out, chances are you'll never get it if it's anything that's remotely interesting. So I I bought up a bunch of stuff way back in the day. It's been sat in my pile of potential for more than a decade now. And at this point, all I did is put it on eBay and sell it, and people are paying me $400 for something that I paid maybe 150 for at the time, right? So can't complain, making a decent return on it. And I've moved away largely from fantasy and sci-fi gaming, certainly the Games Workshop flavors thereof. So it doesn't make sense for me to hang on to it anymore, right? So anyway, got rid of all that stuff. Happy days, job done. And then generated some income that I could then use to buy the things that I actually want. And you know, I still have a lot of stuff that's unpainted, but the good news is I can just grind through that. Things like those Normans I showed you earlier, they're basically a weekend's work in real terms. Like if I have a solid weekend, I will say that with it being summer, I've been very much outdoors, as you can imagine. Also, the cricket's been on. The T20 Cricket World Cup's been on. The games were played in the US and the West Indies. Sadly, I couldn't really justify flying all the way to Texas or New York or Florida to go watch and then pay $200 for $200 for a ticket to go to the game. So I've been watching it on TV, but enjoying that, and then obviously working outside in the summertime. Catherine and I have been really busy. We've produced a lot of courgettes. I'll see if I can include a picture in this video. But yeah, her plants are absolutely booming. So she's having a good time in the garden, and obviously I help out doing my part. We've also had a lot of visitors come, because it's that time of year when it's nice here. So people are coming to our house, staying here, and I've said this in the past, but when people are staying in the house, they typically stay in the lower level, which means I then don't really have access to my painting area. So, you know, it kind of swings and roundabouts. I'm really glad to have people here to visit. I'm enjoying the company. We're going out and we're doing lots of fun activities together. We're being very active, which is good for our health. But obviously means that in the evenings, I'm not really getting any painting done. But also, I will say that with the sun setting so late, I've lost that natural cadence where as the sun goes down and the day comes to an end, I naturally retreat to my painting area, right? Like the sun's setting here at like 10:30 at night in the high summer. So you know, you blink and you realize, wait a minute, you look at your watch and it's like, oh, it's already 8 o'clock at night, but it's still bright outside. You know, you have to make a concerted effort to get down and paint for that in an environment like that, and I've just not done that, to be honest. I've been much more focused on being outdoors and enjoying the weather. So yeah, that's kind of where we are at the moment with the painting and all that. You can see I've prepped up these Crimean figures. The goal is to actually get those done, you know, as part of just a general painting regime at the moment. There's another Wargames Foundry has just gone in. My mate Dave is very much of the Ralph Astley school of wargaming purchases. He's petrified that Foundry is going to go broke or go out of business or just disappear soon, or they'll discontinue figures. So he and I have kind of agreed that we're just going to get the purchases done now, so it's over, and then what we'll do is get the stuff painted at our own leisure. But we don't want to, you know, we want to take this opportunity to capitalize on, first of all, bulk ordering and getting the free postage, and then we have the stuff and we can work on the project and coordinate on that front. So that's where we are right now. And that's it really. I haven't got much more to add, other than to say I hope you all are having a very wonderful summer and a productive time at the painting table, or doing whatever it is you feel like doing at this time of year. I will continue to post updates as and when they come. So the next thing I'm hoping to get out is the finished Von Kleist's Pandora bases that I've done. There should be 3 of them, I think. And then 3 bases worth of those, and then hopefully the next thing after that will be some more completed stuff. But I don't want to make too much, you know, make too many videos of work in progress stuff, because it's not really helpful. Oh, one more thing I wanted to add. Library. We talk about the library a lot on this channel. I'm a big fan of the library. I got this book, which is, you can't really see from the back here, so from the front, so I'll show you. This is Knights Battles for Wargamers. These are different volumes. So Poitiers, Saratoga, Borodino, the Alma and First Bull Run, and Chancellorsville. Now, what I wanted to show you about this was a fantastic book. Got this from my interlibrary loan. And what I like most about this is the maps. And the way that it's written is it's written with the wargamer in mind. So it's pretty awesome, not going to lie. It's a really good book. It's written with Wargamer in mind, so the maps are fantastic. The detail in terms of who's where and who's doing what is fantastic. So this is the dispositions before the battle, and the nice thing about it is the author does like a blow by blow. So he talks about, I'll show you an example here. He talks about like the initial French attack, which was planned by Saint Arnaud, and he gives you this lovely detailed map showing the movement of the troops and also the timings of the various actions. So this has been an absolute pleasure to read. I've really enjoyed it, and it's given me loads of ideas for things to do surrounding the Alma, which is going to be my initial thrust. The nice thing about it is the way that the author breaks things down, and I'll talk about this in more detail in another video, but it makes me realize that you don't have to paint up all of Waterloo to play Waterloo, right? You could do a section of the battlefield, and as long as you have the two opposing forces in roughly the right sort of area of operations, you can actually just play that section of the battle, which means that the flash to bang between your project starting and being able to actually put on a game is a lot smaller than one might imagine, right? So in this case, for instance, let's say my initial focus was on the French. I could actually paint up the initial French assault that goes up, you know, up and over the river, and then kind of pushes through, and I could do the opposing Russian side. But on an equal level, what you could also do is do a lot of cool what-if scenarios. You could say, okay, what if the Russian positions were not quite as far back as they were in reality? What if they were more forward? So you could almost imagine a scenario where you say to the Russian player, right, you are going to command this section of the battlefield. Your orders are to hold the allies and stop them from getting up over the river and up the ridge, and you let the Russian player have carte blanche. On the other hand, you might force the allied player to kind of at least have the initial dispositions and plan, or orders, I suppose, battle orders from the CNC, to say, Marshal Saint Arnaud has said you must do this. So your victory conditions are to execute his plan. Now, how you get there is up to you, but these are the troops at your disposal in your division or whatever. And I think that creates an interesting sort of puzzle, right? And you can load it one way or the other. So you might say to the Russian player, you do get to choose, or you don't get to choose, or the French player, you do get to choose, you don't get to choose. Likewise with the British. You know, we can do again, I'll talk about this in more detail later, but you could do something where you say, okay, what if Raglan had actually listened to Saint Arnaud the night before the battle? What if the timings of the armies actually stepping off was much better synchronized? How would that look differently? So we can do all that stuff later, but the good news is you can do it in sections, so don't have to think about the Alma as being this enormous battle, much in the same way you don't have to think of Gettysburg or Waterloo as being a mega battle. You can think of it as lots of small actions all combined into a larger narrative, right? And I think that's a far healthier way to look at things. I also think it's what stops us from sliding into this hole of assuming that skirmish gaming or large skirmish gaming is the only way to play these games, because I think there's a degree of despair attached to the notion of, oh man, I've got to do all this work just so I can play one battle. Well, that's not strictly true, is it? From what I've just described, it's actually quite possible to do, you know, a good-looking section of the game where each player commands a few battalions on each side, rather than like this enormous mega battle, which I suppose would be multiplayer by its nature anyway. You'd have to have multiple people pushing figures around for it to finish in a reasonable amount of time. But anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully have an update for you again soon. Apologies for the lack of videos. Just wanted to say that I'm immensely enjoying everyone else's content. I am still watching. I am still liking. If you have comments enabled, I am commenting when I feel it's appropriate. If you don't have comments, Ralph, I guarantee you I am sitting here talking to the screen with my comments, even though I can't necessarily pass them on to you. So thank you everyone for watching, and thanks for those who are making videos in this little awesome community to which I belong. Ciao for now.